Good morning. It's Monday, September 22nd. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 717 days old. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back yet again to the FDD Morning Brief. I'm just back from a week in Europe. A special thanks to my FDD colleagues who kept the show running, from the script writers to the producers and hosts. It's good to see this little program of ours keep cranking when I'm in other time zones, or in this case, the Twilight Zone. That's what it felt like in Europe this past week. The decision made by multiple European countries to recognize a Palestinian state is bonkers. I'm not an opponent of Palestinian nationalism. Absolutely, go ahead, believe in that. But the Palestinians are not ready to govern, not by a long shot. The moves brings us no closer to the end of this war in Gaza, because Gaza is run by Hamas and the Palestinian Authority barely controls Ramallah, let alone the rest of the West Bank. So here's to you, Britain, Portugal, France, and all the others. You managed to make a terrible and chaotic situation even more terrible and chaotic. And one more thing. This virtue signaling to your domestic constituents is almost certainly going to fail to deliver the popularity that you seek. Foreign policy malpractice at work. More on that in just a few minutes. Our guest today is Stephen Cook, an expert on U.S. Middle East foreign policy, as well as Arab and Turkish politics. He's the Enrico Mattei Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He also writes a column for Foreign Policy, and he's authored several books, including The End of Ambition, America's Past, Present, and Future in the Middle East. We're going to talk to Stephen about this insane moment in foreign policy in just a few minutes, so stay tuned. You want to talk about Palestinian statehood? Fine. Here's what you need to know. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has been angling for this since 2005. The entire time he's been president without allowing for another election. The campaign, which he calls Palestine 194, didn't really begin in 2011. This is a reference to the Palestinians pining to become the 194th country at the UN. For 14 years, their project has seen fits and starts. Back in 2012, the UN General Assembly held a vote. No less than 138 countries voted to recognize a Palestinian state. But guess what? A General Assembly vote means nothing at the United Nations. Only a Security Council vote can grant the Palestinian statehood. The U.S. position to this day holds that the Palestinians are not ready for statehood, for good reason. Their borders are ill-defined. The government is a kleptocracy, and armed groups run amok, both in Gaza and the West Bank. For the Brits, the Aussies, the French, the Canadians, the Portuguese, they know this. They also know when they take a victory lap for their recent stunt, it's all for optics. There will be no Security Council recognition. There will be no state. What there will be is more pressure on Israel, but zero pressure on Hamas, the terror group that launched the current war, and zero pressure on Iran, the patron of all the groups fighting against Israel. Tell me how this makes any sense, and tell me how this fulfills the once serious mission of the UN. Right, I didn't think so either. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants Washington's help diffusing tensions with Egypt. And man, is that overdue. U.S. and Israel officials told Axios that Netanyahu asked the Trump administration to convince Egypt to roll back its military buildup in the Sinai Peninsula. I can't tell you how big this buildup has been, but I've been hearing about it for months. And it's all a major violation of the Camp David Accords. It's also the last thing we need in a Middle East that is just boiling over with tensions. Last week, during his meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Netanyahu reportedly pointed out a series of Egyptian activities that are causing him to have some concerns. For example, Egypt is allegedly setting up offensive military infrastructure, extending runways at air bases, and building underground facilities that could store missiles in the Sinai. Meanwhile, multinational observers aren't conducting many overland flights, so there's not much monitoring. We're going to talk to Stephen about this in just a few minutes, but man, it does not look good. Headline 2, Qatar is still making a stink about Israel's strike in Doha. I suppose I get it. The Israelis did carry out an attack on Qatari soil. Then again, Qatar is hosting a bunch of terrorists who planned the October 7th attacks. I know two wrongs don't make a right, but this is war, and the Qataris should have known that they were eventually going to get drawn into this thing so long as they continue to play the role of patron to the Hamas terrorist organization. And now Qatar is demanding that Israel apologize, as if an apology would fix this mess. The emir reportedly raised the issue when he met with Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Doha this past week. I sincerely hope the Israelis give the Qataris a sorry, not sorry. Doha needs to apologize for supporting the Hamas terrorist organization since 2009, if not before that. This dirtbag regime has been funding Hamas for 16 years and counting. And headline 3, as the Gaza City offensive ramps up, Gaza-based terrorists fired 2 rockets at the southern Israeli city of Ashdod yesterday. The Iron Dome missile defense system intercepted one. The other fell in an open area. There were reportedly no injuries nor any damage. No group claimed responsibility for the attack, but it really doesn't matter. But I will say this, though, as it turns out, Ashdod hasn't experienced a rocket attack since April. That's 5 months of quiet for a city that was targeted all the time before this war began. In other words, the IDF campaign in Gaza is working, at least in that respect. But the big picture, well, that's still a bit fuzzy. The Israelis think they can squeeze Hamas hard enough for the terror group to relent. Hamas thinks it can play rope-a-dope long enough for the international pressure campaign that's underway that might force Israel to quit the war. In other words, this is a contest of wills. Wars almost always are. How will this one shake out? I seriously have no idea, but the drama is building. All right, it's time to welcome Stephen Cook of the Council on Foreign Relations onto our show. Welcome to the FDD Morning Brief, Stephen Cook.
Good morning. How you doing?
Living the dream, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, let's start with Egypt. What in the wide world of sports is going on in Sinai? The information is fuzzy, but it doesn't look good. Is Egypt gearing up for a conflict with Israel after nearly 5 decades of peace?
And this buildup has been going on for quite some time. This is not something new. The Israelis have raised concern about this months and months ago. And it does seem that the Egyptians are building up in the Sinai, but there's a debate. I spoke to an Egyptian yesterday who said, look, relations between both countries are bad right now. There is no trust. Abdel Fattah Sisi, the president of Egypt, called Israel an enemy state last week, which really picked up my ears. I'm used to kind of this very, very nasty rhetoric, but enemy state is a big deal. Combine that with the military buildup in the Sinai, it is worrying, as you say. But this Egyptian was saying to me, listen, Egyptians scrupulously uphold the treaty, and anything that's going on in the Sinai, the Israelis know about. And what's happening now, mind you, this is an Egyptian view. Anything that the Israelis are saying are an effort to put pressure on the Egyptians, to whip up opposition to Egypt in Congress or within the administration. That seems too pat a statement. President Sisi is under a tremendous amount of pressure, despite all of the happy talk in Egypt about the economic crisis passing. Egyptians remain vulnerable to all kinds of domestic political pressures, whether it's on the economy or whether it's on widespread support for the Palestinians. So this kind of thing of moving into the Sinai, all kinds of nasty rhetoric, including calling Israel an enemy state, is one, a diversionary tactic, and also quite worrying. I mean, we don't know what is going to happen. The Egyptians are very, very worried that a plan for Gaza will include dumping Gaza and all of its problems in the laps of the Egyptians. And in fact, the Arab world has said Israel is not going to make the Arab world responsible for the Gaza Strip. And so this may be an Egyptian message. Hey, you're not going to dump this problem on our laps. But it is very, very worrying. And the fact that the MFO, the multinational force observers, which have been in place in the Sinai for 5 decades, have no real visibility into what the Egyptians are doing, makes this particularly worrying. I wouldn't dismiss this as just kind of rhetoric and diversionary tactics. This is something that I think the Trump administration really needs to get in gear on.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. You know, the saying goes, that as Egypt goes, so goes the rest of the Middle East, right? I mean, that it was the Camp David Accords that was kind of the anchor for the relative calm that we'd seen up until the October 7th attacks. We haven't seen a major war since, I guess, the War of Attrition, or I guess if you want to go back just a little bit further to the Yom Kippur War of 73. But so let me just unpack this for a minute. The Israelis have been advocating for American support for Egypt. They've been probably Egypt's best asset in Congress.
That's correct, right?
Right.
Exactly.
And now what you have is Sisi calling the Israelis an enemy and pointing fingers at the Israelis for trying to undermine the state, when in fact what the Israelis have been doing over the years is pushing Congress to continue the whatever it is, $1.5 billion, or maybe it's more than that. You can remind me, but I mean, the huge amount of money, huge amount of weaponry, and now that weaponry is being pointed at Israel. And then the Egyptians say that the Israelis know about it. Well, yeah, they clearly know about it because they just gone to Rubio and to Trump and said, make this go away. So, I mean, maybe just help me understand this just a little bit more.
Yeah, well, the Egyptians are, again, Sisi's under a tremendous amount of pressure. And what they would say to you is
you mean
that
domestic pressure,
domestic
right?
political pressure, domestic political pressure, that as Israel has prosecuted the campaign in the Gaza Strip, it has outraged and inflamed public opinion in Egypt, and that Sisi needs to maneuver between this political pressure that he's under. And one of the ways to do that is to kind of put forces in the Sinai and wag his finger at the Israelis. But this is something, I think, as you said, the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, March 1979, is an anchor of the relative stability. There has not been a major Israeli-Arab war since that peace treaty. Yes, this is a multi-front campaign, but interstate war has been a thing of the past since the Camp David Accords and the subsequent peace treaty. If I was the president, I would have turned around Rubio and sent him back to Cairo and said, we're going to have to work this thing out. And you're quite right. The Israelis have always very, very quietly advocated for the Egyptians on Capitol Hill to get their $1.3 billion in annual military aid. And before that, their economic aid, which has subsequently been phased out. But again, the Egyptian public has been inflamed by what has happened in the Gaza Strip. And there is a real fear within the Egyptian security establishment that Israel is short of occupying. If they don't actually occupy the Gaza Strip, they'll try to dump Gaza back on the Egyptians.
Right. And then the fear is that you got 1 or 2 million people flooding into the Sinai. And of course, the last thing the Egyptians want
close to the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a major security threat for the Egyptians.
Yeah. All right. So, well, but then again, if Egypt joins the Hamas in this war, well, that doesn't exactly sound like a good thing either. But all right, let's set the inconsistencies.
It's definitely not a good thing. I still consider that a lower probability than anything else. But at the same time, this is not a time to be blasé about it. So many things have happened over these 2 years that I'm sure you said, oh my God, I didn't think that was going to happen. So it requires vigilance on the part of American policymakers.
I've been saying that, that wasn't on my bingo card. I've been saying that repeatedly. And as colleagues have told me, I need to get a new bingo card.
Good point.
All right. Let's talk about Turkey. That's another country you watch. You've been watching it for years now. And this is another leader that is engaging in really nasty rhetoric, I would say irresponsible rhetoric. Recep Tayyip Erdogan referred to Israel the other day when he seemed to imply that the Turks were in the region long before Israel existed and will be there long after. Never mind the inconsistencies in the history of the Jewish people in the region. But okay. Is this just bluster, or is Erdogan taking Turkey down a dangerous path? I mean, this was the guy that called for a pan-Islamic force to right the wrongs of Gaza. What's going on here?
I mean, one of the roads not taken since October 7th is very clearly the Turks, who have good offices, obviously, with Hamas, good offices with the rest of the region after repairing its relations with the Gulf, and actually a rather robust security relationship with the Israelis. They have now wrecked that. And they could have played a constructive role in trying to bring this whole thing to an end sooner rather than later. But instead, Erdogan went on this pro-Hamas bender, rhetorically pushed from the old guard Islamist right in Turkey. He has taken steps to restrict trade, overflights, Israeli access to Turkish ports. Erdogan really has come out, even before any leader in the Arab world, and been harshly critical of the Israelis. He's always aligned himself with Hamas since 2006. He only came to power in 2002, but also reserved for himself the right to continue to conduct business with the Israelis, continue to have a security relationship with Israel. There have been bumps in the road, but now Israelis refer to Turkey as essentially an enemy state. And the place where there is likely to be conflict, if there's conflict between Israel and Turkey, is in Syria. And the Israelis have been working very, very hard to deny the Turks the access that they want to airstrips, intelligence access. A lot of these Israeli airstrikes and military operations in Syria have been designed to deny the Turks the access that they want. And there is a real struggle for Syria. Remember, Patrick Seal wrote that famous book, The Struggle for Syria. There wasn't that much of a struggle then. Now there's actually a struggle for Syria. And it pits Turkey and Israel, and actually Turkey and Saudi Arabia, because, you know, Israel's not going to be the country that's going to shape Syrian politics. But there is now a competition going on between Turkey and Saudi Arabia over who is going to shape Syrian politics. I think the Saudis are in this to win it, just like the Turks are. And it's something that I think the Trump administration needs to put its thumb on the scale in favor of the Saudis. There's no doubt the Turks are going to play a role in Syria, but they shouldn't play the overall big brother shape politics. Otherwise, we'll have another Muslim Brotherhood affiliated Islamist regime in the region, just like has developed in Ankara.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about this. We got Ahmed al-Shara, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, as I like to call him. Let's not forget who he is. He's showing up to the UN. I mean, that's bonkers to me. This guy was the head of the Nusra Front. He was designated by the United States like
$10 million bounty on the guy's head.
What's that?
There was a $10 million bounty on
Ahmed
al-Shara, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani's head.
Right. And so now all of a sudden he's showing up at the UN. He's a world leader. He's wearing a tie. I mean, really does look like Sacha Baron Cohen from The Dictator, but that's maybe another conversation over beers. But in the meantime, I mean, which al-Shara, which Jolani, who's going to show up? Is it Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde?
Yeah, this is a rather extraordinary turn. This is definitely was not on your bingo card, nor was the president meeting him when the president went to Riyadh this past summer. There has been this extraordinary turnaround where the United States has not only, countenanced the rise of Ahmed al-Shara, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, the leader of an al-Qaeda affiliate, now self-declared president of Syria, but we are working very, very closely with the Syrian government to create an environment where he can be successful without testing his intentions whatsoever. Now, there's some scattered bits and pieces of evidence that this has actually been a long-time project of the United States and the neighbors of Syria, that if Bashar al-Assad were to fall, which leader of which militia/jihadist movement would be most acceptable? And apparently it's Ahmed al-Shara, who is not only a jihadist, but the first Syrian leader to address the UN General Assembly since 1967. Now, there's only been 2 Syrian leaders, but now we have a Syrian leader who is a jihadist and an ex-jihadist. We have no idea what's going to happen in Syria. What we do know is he's being treated as the president of the country. He only controls 30% of it. There's been all kinds of ethnic and sectarian violence in Syria. But nevertheless, the Trump administration, in the form of Special Representative and Ambassador to Turkey Tom Barak, has declared Syria open for business. And it seems like what the administration's policy is to lift sanctions and then ask actors in the region like Saudi Arabia and Turkey and others to work it out amongst themselves.
All right. Now, another question for you on Turkey, and maybe I got one more in the tank here for you. But you got Erdogan coming to the White House on Thursday.
To the White House,
right? This is a guy that has supported ISIS, supported Al Qaeda. He just brought about the toppling of the Syrian regime, sponsoring Jolani. Hamas sponsor. Still has the S-400 Russian-made air defense system that actually was the thing that got him kicked out of the F-35 program. This guy continues to just stick a finger in the eye of NATO, a finger in the eye of the United States, and yet he has somehow found himself with an invitation to the White House.
You forgot, Mr. Foundation for Defense of Democracies, that the Turkish president has overseen, or is in the process of overseeing, the destruction of the main opposition group, having all the main opposition leaders arrested, and then appointing a conservator for the party, someone who would be the loyal opposition to Erdogan. I mean, this is a real descent into Islamist authoritarianism in Turkey. And yet, as you point out, he's going to the White House on September 25th, where he is going to announce the purchase of, reporting says, 300 Boeing aircraft. This is after an announcement of purchase of 220, 250 Airbus. I don't know where the Turks are getting the lira for this. The economy has not done well over.
I think they're getting it from
decade.
Qatar, but you know,
you said that. It's entirely possible. And they're looking to get out of F-35 jail by doing something with the S-400. And I think from where the administration looks at it, this is jobs for Americans, building Boeing aircraft and the F-35. And the president isn't particularly committed to, human rights and democracy abroad. So whatever the Turks are doing at home is whatever the Turks are doing at home. And, ever since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, everybody, the United States, as well as Turkey's NATO allies, have been willing to look the other way on Turkey's support for extremist groups, its descent into Islamist authoritarianism, on this myth, based on this myth that Turkey is somehow critical to the Western stance against Russia. And there was a lot of kind of Turkish PR, including in the New Yorker magazine, about how, Turkey was this, staunch supporter of Ukrainian sovereignty, and this whole story about its drones being critical and defending. They sold those drones to Ukraine. They didn't just provide them for the defense of Ukraine. And the Turks have pursued let me put it this way, an ambiguous policy towards both Russia and Ukraine throughout these last 2 years.
And by the way, the Turks have helped to facilitate the illicit movement of assets on the part of Russian oligarchs, the Black Sea.
This is what I'm saying. This ambiguous.
It's not even ambiguous. I mean, I think we can see what's going on here. All right, well, we're going to watch that meeting between Trump and his favorite strongman in Eurasia. It's going to be, I think, something of a bizarre spectacle.
He once called Abdel Fattah Sisi his favorite dictator, but I think his favorite dictator is actually Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Well, yeah, we're not supposed to call Erdogan a dictator, but I think he is one. And, I think he's actually kind of proud of it, if you ask me. Last question before I let you go. Let's just quickly talk about UNGA. Session is shaping up to be a dramatic one. The Israeli-Palestinian issue, Ukraine, Iran snapback, Chinese aggression. I mean, what else can we throw on top of this thing? What are you watching for this week as New York City descends into gridlock and insanity?
I'm going to be there. I usually try to avoid the city. This is probably one of the most consequential UNGAs in a really, really long time. Previously, it's just kind of cocktail parties and speeches. But as you point out, it's like Palestine week. There's going to be lots of controversy over, Chinese aggression, UN snapback sanctions on Iran. I'm looking at that, and I'm just fascinated about what's going to happen with the Syrians. The Council on Foreign Relations is hosting the foreign minister for an on-the-record meeting. This is the primary interlocutor with the Israelis. This is just going to be an unbelievably fascinating thing. I just want to watch what happens with the Syrians. The other important thing is the president is meeting with Washington's Gulf partners and others on Tuesday of this week. And they're going to talk about Palestinian state. They're going to talk about the Qatar strike. They're going to talk about Iran. It'll be super interesting to see what happens in that meeting as well.
All right. Well, give a kiss to the Syrian foreign minister for me. That's bizarre, but okay. Have fun with that. Thank you, Stephen Cook, for joining us today on the FDD Morning Brief.
Thanks for having me.
All right, here's what FDD has on tap for you today. My colleagues Marian Wahba and Ryan Brobes publish a piece in Breaking Defense about the recent Bright Star military exercises co-hosted by the United States and Egypt. Bright Star has been happening since 1980, but now there's competition. Only 4 months ago, Egypt and China conducted their largest bilateral military exercise ever. This is a serious challenge to the United States. Washington needs to set clear boundaries with Egypt. Can't say that enough. Over in the Hill, my colleague Daniel Swift has a piece that looks at China's shifting role in Africa. Beijing has gone from the continent's ATM, its lender, to its largest debt collector. This shift provides the United States an opening to become Africa's partner of choice, but we need to move with speed, purpose, and transparency. The good news is that a vehicle exists to do exactly that. It's called Prosper Africa. Dan actually played a role in this initiative before joining our team in June. More on that to come, I'm sure. Finally, FDD's David Adesnik has a new policy brief on the UN-backed famine declaration in Gaza. Child malnutrition data was misrepresented. I know that's shocking to you. Forecasts ignored aid deliveries and falling food prices. In short, this was politics disguised as science. These are David's words, not mine. And he urges Washington to put its own food security experts on the case before this modern blood libel is accepted as fact. And that is all now for your Monday episode of the Morning Brief. If you're craving more brainy content, check out the expert analysis on our website, fdd.org. Read our quick takes on X, or watch the videos we post on Instagram and YouTube. And yes, you can still make that generous tax-deductible donation before the end of the year at fdd.org/invest. Tune in Wednesday for another riveting episode of your favorite morning show. Until then, I'm Jonathan Schanzer signing off for FDD.